A prominent congresswoman is sounding the latest Donald Trump cognitive alarm after his blunderous performance at the World Economic Forum, and I have her grave concerns that are trending coming up next. Hi, I'm Dan, and if you're new to Occupy Democrats, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our reports about the broken man's broken brain and much more. Let's begin this report with a person who worked closely with Trump and is sounding his own alarm. Watch as former lawyer Cobb breaks down what he's seeing and explains why it's different and worse than the concerns were over Joe Biden.
I don't think there's anybody outside of the United States who believes that Trump is sane. Certainly many people in the United States, intelligent people.
Since you've worked for him in the White House, when you make that reference to sane, do you mean problems with how he approaches things that have long been there, or are you referring to some decline?
No, I think there's been a significant decline. He's always been driven by narcissism, but I think the dementia and the cognitive decline are, palpable, as do many experts, including many physicians.
And I'll say, because we've done this type of reporting about, McConnell had health problems. Joe Biden, his health and competence was called into question. I'll remind viewers, we don't have a confirmed public reporting from a White House doctor or others on the president's mental state. I say that, and condition, I say that out of fairness, but you've worked with him and you're saying not as a medical view, but as someone who actually knows him up close, that you do observe a decline in the same way that some said that about Biden, George Clooney famously.
Yeah, no, I think, when Biden was wandering around the stage and, needed trouble exiting and was shaking hands in midair, with nobody in particular. Yeah, I think people, were rightfully concerned, and certainly following the debate where he struggled so mightily, people were, understandably concerned. But I think, those age-related cognitive issues that Biden displayed, much different than what we're seeing from Trump with regard to the pettiness of putting up nasty placards about presidents publicly in the White House, whitewashing his own history in the Smithsonian. What he said yesterday to the leaders in Norway about disregarding peace since he didn't get the Nobel Peace Prize. Sending out memes of himself planting flags in Greenland and Canada today. And basically today saying, NATO was more of an enemy and China and Russia weren't really boogeymen. That's so un-American and so crazy that I think people understandably are very concerned with.
And speaking of concern, enter Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. This Pablo Reports video you're about to see came to my attention via Midas Touch. Watch as she drops the word erratic and draws a different kind of contrast between Trump and Biden that hints of a cover-up.
Real quick, how big of a factor is Donald Trump's cognitive decline, given what we're seeing at Davos?
I think that the president has been acting in increasingly erratic ways. I think it is really damning when we think about the degree to which mass media outlets reported on Joe Biden, and that resulted in the Democratic Party changing its nominee, etc. Yet we are seeing behavior from Donald Trump that is increasingly erratic and alarming, and everyone's pretending that this is normal. I don't really understand why that is. It is very bizarre. But then, importantly, I think that for our European partners and for our global partners, I think what they also see is the result of not just one man, right? But also the entire government apparatus and a party that is willing to watch someone decompensate in front of the world and do nothing about it. I don't know what's going on, but I find that the standard, it would be helpful if we could apply an even standard here and far more, a fraction of the reporting that was dedicated a year or two ago to see that applied right now.
Got it. Thank you.
At Davos, Trump spoke for 80 minutes and aired his typical list of grievances like the broken record he is. And he referred to Greenland as Iceland 4 times in less than 2 minutes. In other words, it was just another day of the Donald showing us that he is slip-sliding away. And I'll give Emily Maitlis of the news agents the final word. Watch as she gives a uniquely British perspective on Trump's dance with dementia.
I think it's probably time we stopped wanging on about the Monroe Doctrine or the Donroe Doctrine or whichever US foreign policy doctrine history feels it should be throwing at us right now, and start thinking that maybe we will be looking back in years to come and realize with some sympathy that this is probably the early stages of dementia. And delusions like the madness of our own imperial King George are what will actually surface throughout all this. We're looking for people around Donald Trump who are ready just to sort of put him back in a noise-proof room for a while.